Blue's Dead Raticate Theory. Blue's Raticate Theory centers on a specific sequence of events in the original Pokémon Red and Blue games. During your rival battle aboard the SS Anne, Blue uses Raticate as part of his team. This normal-type Pokémon appears healthy and functional during the encounter. However, after this battle, Raticate completely disappears from Blue's roster and never appears again throughout the remainder of the game. The theory suggests that Raticate sustained fatal injuries during your battle and died shortly afterward. Supporting evidence includes Blue's subsequent appearance at Pokémon Tower in Lavender Town, a location specifically designated as a resting place for deceased Pokémon. When you encounter Blue at Pokémon Tower, he makes an unusual comment asking if your Pokémon are dead, which theorists interpret as projection of his own grief. Additionally, evidence points to Blue having available party space for Raticate in later battles, yet he never uses it again despite it being a reasonably strong team member. The timing of Blue's Pokémon Tower visit coincides perfectly with when a trainer would typically visit to pay respects to a fallen partner. Game dialogue suggests Blue is uncharacteristically somber during this encounter, contrasting with his usual competitive demeanor. The theory gains credibility from the game's internal logic. Pokémon Tower serves no other narrative purpose for Blue's character, making his presence there narratively significant. The complete removal of Raticate from his team, combined with the emotional context of the location, creates a compelling case for this interpretation. Mew under the truck theory. The Mew under the truck theory emerged from early internet gaming communities and represents one of the most persistent Pokémon urban legends. Players discovered an inaccessible truck sprite near the SS Anne Harbor in original games. This truck appears in a location that requires specific glitches or cheating devices to reach, making it mysterious and intriguing to players. The theory claimed that using various button combinations, specific Pokémon moves, or completing certain requirements would cause Mew to appear beneath or near this truck. Variations include using strength to move the truck, surfing around it in specific patterns, or returning to the location after completing certain game milestones. Investigation reveals this theory lacks any factual basis. The truck sprite exists purely as environmental decoration with no programmed interactions. Data mining of the original game code confirms no Mew encounter data exists in that location. The truck cannot be moved using strength or any other move, and no hidden triggers exist to spawn Mew there. The theory's persistence stems from Mew's legitimate rarity and the mysterious nature of the inaccessible truck. Players desperately wanted to find Mew through normal gameplay rather than using glitches or cheating devices. The truck's unusual placement in an otherwise empty area naturally attracted speculation about hidden secrets. Modern analysis shows the truck was likely included as background detail to make the harbor area appear more realistic. Game developers often include decorative elements that serve no functional purpose beyond visual enhancement. Ash's coma theory. The Ash coma theory attempts to explain several anime inconsistencies through a dark psychological framework. The theory proposes that Ash fell into a coma after the Spearow attack in the first episode, and that all subsequent adventures exist only in his unconscious mind. Proponents cite Ash's lack of aging, the increasingly fantastical nature of later episodes, and the appearance of legendary Pokémon as evidence of dream logic. The theory suggests Ash's coma-induced dreams explain why he never ages despite traveling for years, why he repeatedly fails to win major tournaments despite his experience, and why he encounters increasingly powerful and rare Pokémon. The presence of Nurse Joy and Officer Jenny in every town allegedly represents his subconscious creating familiar, comforting figures. This theory falls under scrutiny for multiple reasons. The Pokémon anime operates under cartoon logic, where characters naturally don't age to maintain the target demographic's connection to the protagonist. Ash's lack of aging serves commercial purposes, allowing new generations of children to identify with a peer-aged character. The theory's fundamental flaw lies in applying realistic psychological frameworks to a fantasy adventure series designed for children. The increasingly fantastical elements reflect the franchise's expansion and the introduction of new legendary Pokémon for marketing purposes, not dream escalation. Furthermore, the theory contradicts the anime's established continuity. Characters reference past events, maintain relationships across regions, and demonstrate consistent personality development. A coma-induced dream would lack this level of coherent continuity and character growth. Ditto is a failed Mew clone theory. This theory proposes that Ditto represents an unsuccessful attempt at cloning Mew, serving as a prototype before the successful creation of Mewtwo. The evidence supporting this theory spans multiple games and includes both design and mechanical similarities between Ditto and Mew. Both Pokemon share identical coloration in their normal and shiny forms. Regular Ditto and Mew are pink, while their shiny variations are blue. This color matching extends beyond coincidence, suggesting a deliberate design connection. Additionally, both Pokemon naturally learn Transform, making them the only two species with this ability in their base movesets. Location evidence strengthens this theory significantly. Ditto appears in the basement of the Pokemon Mansion on Cinnabar Island, the same location where Mewtwo was created according to in-game journals. These journals document genetic experiments and cloning attempts, establishing the mansion as a site of genetic manipulation. The journals specifically mention failed experiments before Mewtwo's successful creation. Ditto's presence in this location, combined with its genetic similarities to Mew, suggests it represents one of these failed attempts. The theory proposes that scientists successfully replicated Mew's transformability, but failed to maintain genetic stability, resulting in Ditto's amorphous form. Mechanical evidence includes Ditto's unique breeding capabilities. Ditto can breed with any Pokemon except those in the undiscovered egg group, suggesting genetic compatibility that would result from sharing Mew's ancestral DNA. This universal breeding ability mirrors Mew's status as the ancestor of all Pokemon. Gengar is Clefable's shadow theory. This theory suggests that Gengar represents a corrupted or shadow version of Clefable, pointing to design similarities and complementary characteristics. Proponents note that both Pokemon share similar body shapes, with round bodies, pointed ears, and stubby limbs. Their color schemes appear as opposites, with Clefable being light pink and Gengar being dark purple. The theory extends to their typing, noting that normal and ghost types have unique interactions in battle mechanics. In early generations, normal type moves had no effect on ghost types, while ghost type moves had no effect on normal types, creating a perfect defensive complement. Both Pokemon have similar stat distributions and learn comparable movesets, including several overlapping moves. Their evolutionary requirements also show parallels, with both evolving through Moonstone exposure, though Gengar requires trading after evolution from Haunter. However, this theory lacks substantial lore support within the games or anime. No official sources suggest any connection between Clefable and Gengar, beyond superficial design similarities. The Pokemon have completely different origins, habits, and behavioral patterns that contradict a shadow relationship. The similarities likely result from coincidental design choices rather than intentional connection. Game Freak has created numerous Pokemon with similar body styles and proportions without implying direct relationship. The complementary typing and stats represent game balance considerations rather than lore connections. The Great Pokémon War theory. This theory attempts to explain the absence of adult men in the Kanto region by proposing that a devastating war occurred before the events of the original games. The theory suggests this conflict resulted in massive casualties, leaving primarily women, children, and elderly men in most towns and cities. The primary evidence comes from Lieutenant Surge's dialogue in the original games, where he mentions the war and his experience as a soldier. Surge's military background and his use of electric-type Pokemon allegedly support the existence of a recent conflict where Pokemon served as weapons. Additional evidence includes the prevalence of single mothers throughout Kanto, the absence of fathers for most young trainers, and the presence of war memorials in certain locations. The theory suggests that the protagonist's father died in this conflict, explaining his absence from the narrative. However, this theory contains significant logical flaws. Lieutenant Surge's dialogue refers to his service in the American military, as evidenced by his title, The Lightning American, and his use of American slang. His war experience occurred outside the Pokemon world's equivalent of Japan, not within Kanto itself. The absence of adult men in the games likely results from technical limitations and target audience considerations. Early Pokemon games had limited character sprites and focused on creating a world where children could adventure independently. Including numerous adult male characters would have required additional development resources without serving the core gameplay experience. Butterfree and Venomoth switch theory. This theory proposes that Butterfree and Venomoth were accidentally switched during development, arguing that Venonat should evolve into Butterfree based on design similarities. Proponents point to the shared characteristics between Venonat and Butterfree, including large compound eyes, similar body proportions, and comparable coloration. This theory notes that Venonat and Butterfree both have prominent eyes as their most distinctive feature, while Caterpie lacks this characteristic. Conversely, Caterpie and Venomoth share similar mouth structures and body segmentation that Butterfree lacks. The color progression from purple Venonat to purple Venomoth seems more logical than the dramatic color change from green Caterpie to white Butterfree. Design analysis reveals additional similarities in wing patterns and antennae structure between Venonat and Butterfree. Both species have similar wing shapes and positioning, while Venomoth's wings differ significantly in structure and pattern. However, behavioral and ecological evidence contradicts this theory. Caterpie and Butterfree share feeding behaviors, habitat preferences, and life cycle characteristics that align with real-world butterfly development. Caterpie feeds on leaves like actual caterpillars, while Butterfree seeks nectar like real butterflies. Venonat and Venomoth share nocturnal behaviors, poison-type characteristics, and hunting patterns that reflect their intended evolutionary relationship. Their shared poison typing and similar movesets demonstrates consistent design intent rather than accidental switching. Ho-Oh granted Ash eternal youth theory. This theory suggests that Ash's encounter with Ho-Oh in the first episode resulted in a wish for eternal happiness or youth, explaining his lack of aging throughout the anime series. The theory proposes that Ho-Oh, as a legendary Pokemon associated with rebirth and renewal, granted this wish either explicitly or implicitly. Proponents argue that Ash's consistent age despite years of travel, his perpetual optimism, and his ability to form connections with legendary Pokemon all result from Ho-Oh's blessing. The theory suggests that eternal youth allows Ash to maintain his childlike wonder and pure heart, making him worthy of legendary encounters. The theory extends to explain other anime inconsistencies, such as Ash's ability to survive attacks that should be fatal, his quick recovery from injuries, and his consistent moral compass despite traumatic experiences. Ho-Oh's blessing allegedly protects Ash from permanent harm while maintaining his innocent perspective. However, this theory applies unnecessary supernatural explanations to commercial decisions. Ash remains 10 years old because the anime targets children who identify with peer-age protagonists. Aging Ash would require constantly updating the target demographic and potentially alienating young viewers. The anime's episodic nature and focus on adventure over character development naturally maintain status quo elements like age. Ash's encounters with legendary Pokemon result from plot requirements and marketing tie-ins rather than supernatural worthiness. Genesect is modified Kabutops theory. This theory proposes that the ancient Pokemon modified by Team Plasma to create Genesect was originally Kabutops. The evidence spans design similarities, timeline consistency, and behavioral characteristics that connect these two species across geological time periods. Both Pokemon share remarkably similar body structures, including segmented bodies, prominent scythe-like appendages, and predatory builds designed for hunting. Their head shapes and eye placement show clear evolutionary connections, while their stance and movement patterns demonstrate consistent behavioral traits. The timeline evidence proves particularly compelling. Genesect's Pokédex entries state it existed 300 million years ago, which aligns perfectly with Kabutops' Paleozoic-era origins. This timeframe places both species in the same geological period when arthropods dominated marine ecosystems. Behavioral analysis reveals shared hunting strategies and territorial instincts. Both species demonstrate pack hunting behaviors, aggressive territorial defense, and similar prey preferences. Their movesets include overlapping attacks that suggest retained muscle memory from their shared evolution origin. The modification process described in genetics lore involves technological enhancement of an ancient species. Team Plasma scientists allegedly added mechanical components to improve the original Pokemon's capability. The resulting design maintains Kabutops' core structure while adding technological elements like the cannon and enhanced arm plating. Fossil events within the game support this connection. Kabutops fossils appear in the same geological strata where Genesect remains might theoretically be found. The technological movements would explain why Greensect fossils don't appear naturally, as the enhanced specimens were artificially created rather than naturally occurring. N is a Zoroark theory. This theory suggests that N, the primary antagonist of Pokemon Black and White, is actually a Zoroark, using illusion abilities to appear human. The evidence includes design similarities, behavioral patterns, and the prominent role of Zoroark in N's storyline. Physical evidence points to N's unusual appearance, including his long green hair that resembles Zorak's mane and his instinctive eye color that matches Zorak's red eyes. His clothing choices, particularly his preference for glowing garments, remain Zoroark's natural fur patterns and coloration. His clothing choices, particularly his preference for flowing garments, mirror Zoroark's natural fur patterns and coloration. Behavior analysis reveals N's exceptional ability to communicate with Pokemon, which exceeds normal human capabilities. His instant understanding of Pokemon emotions and thoughts suggests a deeper connection than typical trainer empathy. This ability aligns with Zoroark's natural pack communication skills and emotional intelligence. The theory gains support from Zoroark's frequent appearances in locations where N has been present. Multiple Zoroark encounters occur in areas associated with N's activities, suggesting either a connection to him or that he's one of them. The timing of these appearances often coincides with N's mysterious disappearances from human society. However, the theory faces significant contradiction from well-established lore. N's backstory includes detailed childhood experiences from human caregivers and documented interactions with other humans who knew him before his Pokemon abilities manifested. These historical connections would be impossible to maintain through illusion alone. The more plausible explanation suggests N and Zoroark share a deep friendship rather than identity. N's unusual abilities likely result from his unique upbringing and natural empathy rather than species identity. His connection to Zoroark represents partnership rather than disguise. Cubone is baby Kangaskhan theory. This theory proposes that Cubone represents an orphaned baby Kangaskhan that wears its deceased mother's skull as protection and remembrance. The evidence includes size similarities, behavioral patterns, and the mysterious origin of Cubone's signature skull helmet. Size comparison reveals that Cubone's proportions match those of baby Kangaskhan found in their mother's pouches. Both species share similar body structures, limb proportions, and general appearance when accounting for Cubone's skull covering. The theory suggests that orphaned baby Kangaskhan developed differently when forced to survive independently. The skull's helmet's origin presents the theory's central mystery. Cubone's Pokédex entries state it wears its mother's skull, but never specify the mother's species. The theory proposes this skull belongs to an adult Kangaskhan who died protecting her offspring, leaving the baby to fend for itself. Behavioral evidence shows both species sharing territorial instincts, similar dietary preferences, and comparable social structures. Cubone's solitary nature allegedly results from trauma and necessity rather than natural behavior, explaining the personality differences between the species. However, multiple game mechanics contradict this theory. Cubone can breed and produce more Cubone offspring, which would be impossible if they were actually Kangaskhan. The breeding mechanics clearly establish Cubone as a distinct species with its own evolutionary line. Additionally, Cubone's mother appears as a Marowak ghost in Pokemon Tower, explicitly confirming that Cubone's parent was also a ground-type Pokemon, rather than a normal-type Kangaskhan. This direct evidence from the original game definitively disproves the theory. Legendary beasts were evolutions theory. This theory represents the most compelling Pokemon theory based on comprehensive evidence spanning multiple game mechanics and design elements. The theory proposes that Raikou, Entei, and Suicune were originally Jolteon, Flareon, and Vaporeon who died in the Brass Tower fire and were subsequently revived by Ho-Oh with enhanced legendary status. Type matching provides the foundation of this theory. Raikou's electric typing directly corresponds to Jolteon, Entei's fire typing matches Flareon, and Suicune's water typing aligns with Vaporeon. This perfect type correlation extends beyond coincidence, suggesting intentional design connections. Design analysis reveals striking similarities between each legendary beast and its corresponding evolution. Raikou and Jolteon share spiky fur patterns, similar body proportions, and comparable facial structures. Both species feature prominent fangs, pointed ears, and electrical discharge capabilities that manifest through similar anatomical features. Entei and Flareon demonstrate even more obvious connections through their shared main structures, body coloration, and fire generation abilities. Both species have fluffy, flame-colored fur around their necks and similar tail designs. Their facial features, including eye shape and muzzle structure, show remarkable consistency that suggests evolutionary relationship. Suicune and Vaporeon share the most subtle but significant similarities. Both species have streamlined bodies, optimized for aquatic movement, similar fin-like appendages, and comparable head shapes. Their ability to purify water and their graceful movement patterns demonstrate retained characteristics from their alleged Vaporeon origins. Statistical evidence provides compelling mechanical support for this theory. The legendary beasts' base, stat, totals, and distributions mirror enhanced versions of their corresponding evolutions. Raiko's speed and special attack stats reflects Jolteon's strengths amplified to legendary levels. Entei's attack and HP stats correspond to Flareon's physical capabilities, enhanced through legendary transformation. Suicune's defensive stats and special capabilities align with Vaporeon's tanky nature, elevated to legendary status. The stat progression from each evolution to its corresponding legendary beast follows logical enhancement patterns that maintain core strengths while adding legendary tier power levels. EV yield analysis reveals another layer of evidence supporting this theory. When defeated, each legendary beast provides effort values that match their corresponding evolution specializations. Raiko yields speed EVs like Jolteon, Entei provides attack EVs like Flareon, and Suicune grants HP EVs like Vaporeon. This mechanical consistency suggests retained characteristics from their pre-legendary forms. Hidden ability connections provide the most compelling evidence for this theory. Game data reveals that the legendary beasts possess hidden abilities that were programmed but never officially released. These hidden abilities directly correspond to the signature abilities of their alleged evolution origins, creating perfect mechanical parallels that extend beyond visible design elements. The timeline evidence aligns perfectly with established Johto lore. The Brass Tower fire occurred 150 years before the events of Gold and Silver, providing sufficient time for the legendary beasts to establish their current legendary status. Ho-Oh's departure from the tower coincides with the creation of the legendary beasts, suggesting the Phoenix Pokémon used its resurrection powers immediately after the tragedy. Behavioral analysis shows retained characteristics from evolution origins, despite legendary enhancement. Raiko maintains Jolteon's tendency towards solitary behavior and electrical territory marking. Entei demonstrates Flareon's loyalty and protective instincts amplified to legendary proportions. Suicune exhibits Vaporeon's calm demeanor and water purification ability enhanced through legendary transformation. The theory explains several narrative inconsistencies in the Johto storyline. The legendary beast's immediate appearance after Ho-Oh's departure, their perfect type distribution, and their unusual behavior patterns all align with traumatic death and resurrection rather than natural legendary status. Their roaming behavior suggests relentless and searching patterns consistent with beings trying to understand their transformed existence. Archaeological evidence within the games supports this interpretation. The Brass Tower's remains contain no legendary beast artifacts or historical references, suggesting they weren't originally legendary Pokémon associated with the location. Their sudden appearance to Johto folklore coincides exactly with the tower's destruction, indicating their legendary status begin with that specific event. This theory represents the most thoroughly supported Pokémon theory due to its comprehensive evidence spanning visual design, mechanical system, statistical analysis, and narrative consistency. The connections between the legendary beasts and their corresponding evolutions extend far beyond superficial similarities, creating a web of evidence that suggests intentional design relationships rather than coincidental parallels.